Hi, Charlie again. This week we want to deal with definitions of terms. So of course the first thing to start out with, if we're trying to deal with a subject scientifically, is define that word science. Science is not science because somebody that wears a lab coat who calls himself a scientist does it, but it's because it is sensible, meaning you can feel it with your five senses, it's repeatable, and it is only in the present. If we take something in the present that we can really look at, take a woodpecker for instance, a very interesting bird. If you try to think about how could a woodpecker evolve, slowly change from a different kind of a bird into a woodpecker, you're kind of stuck with a few problems. First, let's just look at how possibly a woodpecker could evolve. This bird's flying along one day, and he sees a bug land on a tree. And so he decides to climb in. He sees the bug climb into the tree, and he says, "Oh, hey man, there's dinner." He likes that particular kind of bug. So he runs up there, bangs his head, his beak, into the tree, and of course drives his beak straight back into his brain. Bang, he falls off. No evolution happening there. Can't happen. Well, let's just give it that much, that maybe he developed a tough bill somehow. So he flies up there, bangs his beak in there. That worked well. But his brain rattles around inside of his skull and turns into jelly, and he falls off. He's dead. Okay, let's say he did develop somehow a very tough shock-mounted brain, which woodpeckers have. So he bangs his head into the tree, his brain doesn't shatter, and he knocks a nice big hole. But he's got a little tiny tongue. Well, so he can't get the bug out because the bug isn't waiting for him. Well, let's say that somehow, somewhere, he developed this tongue 7 times longer than his head. And so the bug runs in there, he pokes his tongue in there, and of course, why does the bug jump on his tongue? He doesn't. Well, let's assume that somehow he developed a special kind of glue on the end of his tongue with a little barb, so he could sneak in there without seeing where the bug is and grab the bug with his sticky glue, and he reels it back in. What are you going to do with a tongue that's 7 times the length of your head? Of course, as you pull it in, it beats you around the head. What would you do with all... You'd choke and gag on a tongue like that. Oh, no, no, no. Somehow, without knowledge of how to do it, this woodpecker developed a way to pass its tongue under his skin, outside of his skull, and pokes it in his right nostril. But of course, as he gets the bug into his mouth, it's stuck on his tongue. How does he get it off? Well, there's a special saliva that dissolves the glue so he can take that bug off, and he has food. Also, he has developed special claws where woodpeckers can walk up and down trees that other birds can't. His tail feathers are very strong so that he can push against the tree. So when he bangs his head, if a regular bird tried to do that, bang his head, he'd pop right off. But he's got claws, and his pivot point is his tail, so he can bang into the tree 400 times a second and not pop off the tree. Now, the interesting thing about that is if we take one of those things away, if he doesn't have the claws to hold him on the tree, if he doesn't have the saliva to get the bug off the tongue, if his tongue didn't have the saliva to start with, or if he didn't have some place to put the tongue when he's not using it, he would die. It would not evolve. You've got to have them all happen at the same time. Take, for instance, a very simple thing like a mousetrap. There's 5 parts to this type of mousetrap. Like a woodpecker, if you take one part away, the trap won't work. It won't catch mice. It won't snap on your finger. Same way, we're dealing with a complex situation here that defies the possibility of evolution. Finally, we want to cover one more definition this week, and let's look at the word evolution. It's used in many ways, but this one is the concept that given enough time, all things will happen. That a rock ultimately will turn into a man. Non-living things turn into living things. They'll say it only happened once, but it still happens. That is what they're saying. That's like saying that this mousetrap could ultimately turn into a mouse, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Next week I'll cover more animals that are impossible animals that could not have evolved.